Golf News RI presents the Golf Dudes Podcast. Here are the dudes.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Golf Dudes Podcast on this fine Thursday night in mid-December. I'm Joe Calabro, co-founder of Golf News RI. Joining me as always, almost always, is Golf News RI co-founder Rich Capali. Rich, how you doing tonight, buddy boy? Having a good day?
I'm still depressed. It's mid-December and it's freezing out. I can't play golf. I have to stay in the house. I'm miserable. It's terrible. But Christmas is almost here, and I should be jolly for that, I guess, right?
They always say, have a holly jolly Christmas. Obviously, joining us right off the jump is senior writer for ESPN, Bob Harrig. We'll get to him in just a second, but first we should tell you that the Golf Dudes Podcast is presented by Links Drinks. Links Drinks is known for their transfusion in a can. A transfusion is vodka, ginger ale, and grape juice all mixed up into one refreshing beverage. Look for Links Drinks at country clubs and liquor stores near you. And as I mentioned, Bob Harrig joins us, senior golf writer at ESPN. He's also the author of a new book coming out on April 26, 2022, called Tiger and Phil, Golf's Most Fascinating Rivalry. And anyone that's followed the show knows that Rich and I are both huge Tiger Woods fans and Phil Mickelson fans. I'm a converted Phil Mickelson fan, if you will. But Bob, thanks so much for taking a few minutes of your busy schedule to chat with a couple of guys that pretend to know what they're doing up in Rhode Island. We really appreciate it.
Nah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. No problem at all.
Now, let me ask you this. Are we your first promotional interview for this book?
Believe it or not, no.
Really?
No,
Damn, I was trying to get number one.
Yeah, no. Well,
Shoot.
Listen, you're close, but
all right, I'll take that.
It's funny when the word got out or came out sort of last week that this is going to be coming. I got a bunch of requests, and so yeah, it's been a good little rollout to start. I mean, I'm not big on the marketing side of things, but my understanding is from the publisher that they like to get the word out early. They like to get people buying these books in advance. That's part of what makes it go. And so I'm happy to do my part. The heavy lifting is done. This is the easy part.
Right. So let me ask you this. Obviously, we want to talk a bunch about the book, and I want to ask you about some other PGA Tour storylines as well. We'll get to that in a bit. But let me ask you this. As a writer myself, and somebody who is hoping to write a book one day in the future, as kind of one of my bucket list things. Talk about your process for putting this together. It was funny. We had Armin Katayan on, I guess it was back in January or whatever it was, whenever his documentary came out. I feel it was January. And I had him on. He was nice enough to come on, and he talked about, he had written the book beforehand. He talked about how he had 3 years to write the book, and he literally took 2 years of it just to put storylines together and timelines and all these different things. And so as a writer, I'm just curious for you, what was your process putting this together? What was that whole thing like?
Yeah, I think for me it was a little bit different than that. I didn't have quite that as much time as them, and I did sort of have a time frame that I had. I was contractually obligated to get a manuscript done, and I think it was roughly 15 months from the time I started until that manuscript had to be done. And I obviously had an outline. I had a proposal that I had put together. I kind of had a chapter outline, which changed a lot over the course of doing it. It didn't really work out exactly the way I had planned it. Things changed as I went. Obviously, Tiger being in the car crash changed things. Phil winning the PGA Championship changed things. Obviously, that for the better. The Tiger thing for the worse. Obviously, because it was so horrific. It's not anything anybody would want to have to discuss. But and so I gave myself. I think I decided I was going to give myself roughly 2 months, 2.5 months, where I did nothing but reporting. Just was doing interviews, research, what have you. And then I decided, and had been sort of counseled, even though you're going to keep reporting, you want to start writing because you don't want to get to where you are having to write so much of it at the end. And I was on a pretty good pace, really, until February when Tiger's crash occurred. That put me behind. It put me behind because of work duties, obviously. That was a big story for several weeks. I got really busy with work, and I wasn't able to devote much time to the book. And also, it meant that I had to skew things a little bit differently. I felt like I had to do an entirely new beginning to the book with Tiger's accident. Knowing that the book wasn't going to be coming out until this year, not knowing really how he was going to recover, I felt like it was the elephant in the room and you had to address it. So that put me behind, and I found myself, despite my best intentions, really, really scrambling at the end to get it done. Now, the good news is there's been several months since that deadline, and there's been a good bit of back and forth and tweaking and, updates and reworking things. So it wasn't like it was all or nothing. I was done, but still the process is, it's daunting. I have a ton of respect for people who do this a lot because you got to be incredibly disciplined, and you need to be chipping away at it almost every day.
Absolutely. So let's get into some of the rivalry. Obviously, everyone kind of knows about it. And it's, as you surely point out, it's kind of carried golf for any number of years. But talk about how it started. We'll kind of go through the years here, but talk about how it started. Like did they know each other? Obviously, everyone knew about Tiger as an amateur, right? He was a phenom. He had huge crowds everywhere he went. Phil was probably similar. So when did that rivalry first take shape? When did people officially say, okay, this is a rivalry now? When was that? Was there a moment or any specific time frame?
I don't think there was a specific moment. The age difference, roughly 5 years,
right,
meant that rivalry wasn't really going to take hold until Tiger got into his pro career. I tried to get to the bottom of when they might have been aware of each other. And, Phil's in college and Tiger is, barely in high school. Even though they only lived about 90 miles apart,
crazy.
they never really intersected much in their younger years. Certainly Tiger would have known about Phil. Phil was winning everything when he was in college. He won 3 NCAA titles. He won a U.S. Amateur. In 1991, he won a tour event as an amateur in Tucson. That's the same year that Tiger won his first U.S. Junior. So, Tiger was pretty famous for a young guy, but he wasn't on the national radar in 1991, where Phil was. I mean, Phil could have turned pro and given up the rest of his college at that point and moved on and decided not to. Tiger was still a few years away from that. It really was, when Tiger came out and started winning, and Phil was sort of deemed to be a guy who's going to win a lot. He was a young star in the making and did win a good bit early on. He won more tournaments before age 25 than anybody since Jack Nicklaus. And so when Tiger comes along and sort of just blows all that away, that's when it became a thing. And, it took a while for Phil to stand up. I mean, Tiger blew out and won 8 majors before Phil won 1. It's really hard to believe that looking back, nobody was ever going to catch Tiger at that point, but Phil ended up turning it around to a point where he was a threat. He didn't win more, and he might not have even won as much, but he was a threat.
So, Rich, did you want to jump in, or?
Well, you can go on with the early stuff. I got more current stuff to ask.
All right, so
you can go on with the early Tiger stuff.
They so obviously they go back and forth. They were in the final group. Was it I just watched the other day too because I'm a nerd. They were in the final pairing of the Masters in 2000. Was it 2000 or 2001 when Tiger completed the Tiger Slam 2001? So they were in the final group there. And then a fascinating part of their history is, in my opinion, is the 2004 Ryder Cup when they were paired together, and the whole thing it was a complete disaster. They obviously didn't mix together. From what I remember, from what I researched, they really didn't even talk to each other for a good portion of that round. Would you say that around that time was kind of the height of the rivalry, or where would you say, because it obviously got to a point, and Tiger, obviously we've heard stories about Tiger and his mother calling him Fat Phil, and different things along those lines. Where would you say the height kind of that rivalry came from? Because I would guess it would be in that type of area there, because that was a pretty controversial move. I read anyway.
That was when the rivalry was starting to get interesting.
All right.
If you go all the way back to 1999, that was the first time Tiger and Phil were paired together in a major when it mattered. They had been paired together for the first time at the 97 PGA Championship that Davis Love won, but they were way out of contention. 99 at Pinehurst, they played together in the third round. And, everybody remembers Payne Stewart winning, making that putt on 18, Phil in the last group with them, Phil's wife about to have a baby. In fact, she did have a baby the very next day.
Yep.
Everybody wonders what would have happened if there had been a playoff. But Tiger had a great chance to win that tournament. He was in it until the 17th hole on Sunday. And obviously Phil had an incredible chance to win too. That was really the first time where they were together and in the mix. The 2001 Masters, Phil had a chance to get in the way of history. He was, as you noted, he was paired with Tiger in the final round of the Masters.
Right.
He ended up finishing third.
Right.
Phil was frustrated at the Masters there for a long time. I mean, Tiger won the Masters 4 times before, three times before Phil even won a major, and that was a great opportunity Phil had. I mean, people forget he had it pretty close there on the front 9, and then he let it get away from him. As far as the 404 Ryder Cup, that's when things had started to turn. Tiger was having probably his worst year as a pro. He'd only won once that year, didn't really contend in the majors, was starting to go through a swing change, somewhat discreetly with Hank Haney, who didn't really officially – he was probably his coach that year, but it wasn't really official until 2005. And Phil wins the Masters. Tiger's not a factor. Phil finishes second at the U.S. Open, double bogey on the 71st hole. Is in contention at the Open at Royal Troon that Todd Hamilton beat Ernie Els in a playoff. And Phil had never done anything in an Open. He was really poor over there until that time, and he was a shot or two out of a playoff. And then the PGA that Vijay Singh won, again, Phil was in contention. He was right there, and Tiger wasn't for any of that. So Tiger's having not a great year. Phil has a very strong year. Wins a major, contends in the others. And the last thing Tiger wanted to do was get chummy with a guy who he saw as a threat. And finally, Phil was a threat. That was the year it started to change. Tiger used to be dismissive of Phil. He used to sort of think that he was underachieving. He was wasting his talent. He said some things under his breath or behind the scenes that were derogatory, and wondered why Phil wasn't better. And now all of a sudden he was, and Tiger, recognized it. Look, Phil's a hell of a player. He always has been. He just hasn't lived up to his potential. Now he is living up to his potential, and that's why that wasn't going to work. They weren't going to be chummy, and he wasn't going to be giving Phil his secrets, and obviously they didn't play all that great either, which didn't help. and we had that disaster at the Ryder Cup. They lost both matches, and the U.S. got waxed.
Is that what would have happened if they put Bryson and Brooks together this past Ryder Cup? Would have been something similar.
That's a good question.
Sorry, I had to go there.
I'm not so sure that it would have been that same result. I also point out in there that it's not like Tiger and Phil played horrifically that day at that Ryder Cup. They actually combined to make they played Padraig Harrington and Colin Montgomery in that best ball match to start the whole Ryder Cup. And they actually combined to make 5 birdies. Well, the other guys made 8. No other European team made more than 5 in the morning session. That's how match play is. It just so happened that they went up against a pretty good team. And in the afternoon, in the alternate shot, which a lot of people think they should have never been paired together in alternate shot, given the fact that they're both not exactly right down the middle off the tee. You're playing with the other guy's golf ball, which is always going to be a problem for whoever played with Tiger's golf ball. But they got up 3-up, and they went 3-up in that match before they blew it. It got to the 18th tee all square, and that's when Phil blew it up against that mesh fence, and that led to a drop, and they lost the hole. So people kind of forget the score. It didn't have to be as bad as it was, despite the fact that the body language between those guys looked like anything but two guys who wanted to be playing together.
That's interesting that you point that out, because how they actually, like you said, they actually were in the match. They didn't get dusted, but just like you said, the body language, it was bad optics, and they obviously lost. And the U.S. lost the Ryder Cup that year, so the whole thing combined probably paints that in history worse than it might have actually been in all reality. So it's interesting that you point that out as one of those how history looks back on certain events. One thing, and then I want Rich to jump in. He's got a few fanboy questions. Obviously over the last, we're golf fans, right? Obviously over the last few years, the relationship has changed. Obviously, Tiger's had a bunch of injuries, the car wreck, back fusion surgery a few years prior to that, or whatever it was. And the relationship has changed somewhere along the line. They credit it, or at least Phil has come out and credited it to working together on Ryder Cups. In your research and writing, where did the rivalry take another turn, right? It took a turn in 2004 or so around there, like you said. Now, relatively recently, it's taken a turn back the other way. Where do you sense that kind of changed back?
It was in the 2015-16 time period. If you recall, in early 2015, Tiger developed a serious case of what has been described as the chipping yips. Yep. Whether it really was the yips or not, whether you want to diagnose it as that, he was really struggling. He one of the game's greatest at that, was chunking chips and struggling to, he was just having issues, probably due to his back. And he took 9 weeks off. He withdrew after the first round at Torrey Pines, or during the first round. Didn't show up again until the Masters. And Tiger later disclosed that during that time, Phil reached out to him and offered to help him. Offered to help him with his short game, offered to help him with his chipping. And, Tiger was moved by that. He was very appreciative. He thought that was a great gesture on his part. It makes you wonder if it would have been the other way, if Tiger would have done it. It makes you wonder, if the two of them would have ever sat down and talked how they think it through, how it might have helped the other guy. And then in 16, and really 15 also, Tiger started to get involved with the U.S. teams. That year was a President's Cup year, and Tiger didn't go to South Korea for the President's Cup, but he was heavily involved. He was texting Davis Love, who was an assistant captain and was going to be the Ryder Cup captain the next year. And Phil played on that team, obviously, and he started to take some ownership. 16, Tiger was an assistant to Davis Love, Ryder Cup. Tiger didn't play all year in 2016, and showed up obviously at Hazeltine, and Phil and Tiger engaged. They talked strategy. They texted. They got in touch with each other. They thought through teams and pairings and things like that. And this is sort of exactly what Phil envisioned when he took down Tom Watson in 14 at Glen Eagles, when he was very critical after that Ryder Cup loss. And
that famous press conference.
Kind of the famous press conference in the cold in Scotland. And he was
or infamous, whatever you want to look at it.
Look, to this day, he gets criticism for it, but if he hadn't done that, it makes you wonder if anything would have ever changed, because it was so public and it became so apparent that the players were not happy with the way things were going and the way the teams were constructed. They just sort of picked a captain every 2 years. There was no continuity. And that's all changed since then. You see it now. I mean, look, Steve Stricker's been involved in every U.S. team since then. David Love's been involved in a bunch. So is Jim Furyk. For better or for worse, they have created continuity. Phil's been a big part of that. Tiger has been a big part of that. And, they might not win every one of them, but they've put themselves in a better position to do it. Tiger and Phil have a lot to do with that.
Awesome. Rich, you want to ask your fanboy questions?
Let's take a little Tiger break for a second. So we just learned recently that ESPN is going to be taking over PGA Tour Live, which is one of my favorite aspects of the PGA. I love being able to see the early groups go off, which a lot of networks don't cover. So with your employer taking over the coverage of PGA Tour Live, what do you think the current state of golf media is?
Well, I mean, that is a dynamic that I think goes beyond or is separate from the actual golf media. We're in this realm of people want to see as much as possible. And that's why the streaming aspect, the PGA Tour Live, which has been around for a while, has gotten some legs. And I think what's happened is people have gotten frustrated that there's not even more of it. The nice thing about this new plan is that there's going to be more than one stream. There's going to be a couple of different streams available on ESPN Plus. There's going to be more of a traditional golf broadcast, which we've never really had before, until it comes on Golf Channel. The PGA Tour Live, the streaming aspect has been a couple of featured groups. Well, now you're going to have one aspect that'll almost be like a regular golf broadcast. It'll be going around from hole to hole and different places. Then there still will be featured groups. I believe there's going to be 2 different featured groups. So one on one channel and one on another. And then a 4th channel is going to be featured holes. So where you can watch like 3 or 4 different holes. And so it's way outside of my realm, but from what I gather, it's an incredible and impressive commitment, and I think golf fans will enjoy it. Now, look, is everybody going to be satisfied? No. I mean, golf is an incredibly hard sport to televise. You hear it now all the time, too many commercials, too much this, too much that. Look, I'm not here to defend it. I'm just explaining that, it's expensive to broadcast golf. It's not a football stadium or field that's 100 yards. It's 50, 60 acres out there that you got to cover. And a lot of cameras, a lot of personnel, it's different places every week. And so, I think it's an impressive, how well they do. And I think it's kind of nice that we're going to get to see even more now.
Let me ask you this
now, because you're getting so many sports under one umbrella. I mean, you got UFC, now you got golf, they just got hockey, all the college basketball you want. So it's like you just go to ESPN pretty much for anything now, and that's pretty cool, it all being under that one umbrella.
Yeah, and the nice thing for the tour is that there are already a lot of people who subscribe to that, and they're just going to inherently they're going to inherently be getting golf now, and it's cheaper. I think PGA Tour Live has been $9.99 a month,
Yeah, I think
and
it's
that's
like
all you
100 for
get.
the season or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's all you get. You're going to pay less than that, and you're going to get all the other stuff you were just talking about. So
Yeah.
I think it's a win-win for golf fans. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you this, Bob. While we're on the topic of other things regarding the PGA Tour, then I want to do a couple more questions, then we'll get you out of here. Obviously, talking to Bob Harrig of ESPN, the author of Tiger and Phil: Golf's Most Fascinating Rivalry, comes out April 26, 2022. So shortly after Tiger or Phil win the Masters, the 2022 Masters. One can only hope. Let me ask you this: one of the major stories in golf is the PGA Tour versus Greg Norman's golf league that's backed by Saudi money and all this whole controversy. So I guess my question is, and we've ran on a little bit, obviously citing guys like yourself, Eamon Lynch, and others. But can you just talk about that dynamic, and how do you think, if you had a guess or an educated guess, I'm sure, what do you think the final conclusion is going to be on that? I mean, Greg Norman seems like he's going forward with it. It's funny that they're actually playing a tournament this week that was founded by Greg Norman, so it's kind of funny how that kind of worked out. But just talk about that, because I think that's a fascinating storyline, the battle between the two, or the impending battle between the two golf leagues. What do you think about that?
Well, you're right. It is fascinating. I think it's a huge story that in some ways is being underplayed. It has the potential to be very disruptive to what the norms are in professional golf. And look, I could argue either side of this. Like if you asked me, I had to choose one. If I was in a debate class, I had to pick one side. Even if I don't believe it, I could argue it. And so here's the Greg Norman side that I'll give you first. Norman tried this way back in the day when he was a player. At the height of his career, he tried to start a world tour. He had the backing of Fox Sports. He was going to play, I believe it was going to be, 10 events with, at that time, $3 million purses, which was considered huge. And everybody was going to be guaranteed money. And his whole thing has always been that as an independent contractor, he should have the right to play wherever he wants. And he told stories about how he would go to play in the winter, the Australian summer, and on his home circuit. It was, I believe, it was then called the Australasian Tour. And he wanted to go back there in this time frame, usually December, January, and play a handful of events there. He had to, in essence, get permission from the PGA Tour. The way it's set up is if you're a PGA Tour member, they own your TV rights, your media rights. If you are going to play somewhere else, you've got to get permission, or in what they call a release. And you're only allowed 3 of them. And if you wanted to get a 4th or a 5th or a 6th, they would extract some favor from you. In the case of a guy like Norman, it might be,
wow.
we're going to ask you to play 2 extra events, or we're going to ask you to do a clinic, or we're going to ask you to do this. And he just felt that was unfair. He felt that, look, I play my 15 events on the PGA Tour. That's what's required. If I want to go play somewhere else, I should be able to do it. And, look, he's kind of got a point. They are billed as independent contractors. Why aren't they allowed to go wherever they want? So now I take the PGA Tour side of it. Well, if you're a member organization, you're going to have rules, right? I mean, if any of us were independent contractors, the people that employ us, even on an independent basis, have some rules and guidelines. Like, you might not be able to do this if you're going to work for us. And that's what the tour does. They have been protecting their asset. If, for example, when Tiger and Phil played their match in 2018, they, in essence, had to get a release to do that. The tour, because they own their media rights, had to be paid a fee. Phil, to this day, is very upset by that. He thinks that was wrong. But that's the way it works. Because If you didn't do that, what would keep Tiger and Phil from playing an exhibition 10 times a year? Well, that would hurt the PGA Tour. It would detract from their own events. It might possibly take away sponsorship dollars. It would keep those guys from playing their tournaments. So I get that side of it. I get the tour side of it. And, Tiger had a great answer to this last week when he said, my legacy is the PGA Tour. Is there going to be a legacy established for guys playing against whatever 40, 50 players on the, Super Golf League? Will that happen? I mean, I guess you'd have to look at things like, I'm trying to think of other things in sports when there were rival leagues like the USFL in football, or way back in the day when the AFL was the rival to the NFL. And they actually had a separate, they didn't play each other. They had a separate league. Well, do we care about the records set in that league back in those days, which really only lasted 6 or 7 years, 8 years until they merged? Maybe we do. But, I mean, that's what you're looking at. I mean, Tiger and Sam Snead are tied. Are we going to care if somebody wins 20 times on the Super Golf League? These are the things going back and forth. The other thing that I'll say is the reason that a thing like these rival leagues have legs is because pro golfers have no guaranteed money. I mean, yes, they make a lot of money if they're very, very good. They have endorsements, but I'm talking about from the leagues themselves. Steph Curry gets endorsements too, but he's in guarantee. What's he guaranteed? $150 million over the next 6-8 years. I don't know what his contract is, but it's a lot. It's more than Tiger has made in his entire career on the course. And so golfers don't have the guaranteed money. I use Ricky Fowler as an example. He had an off year this year. Didn't even finish in the top 125. Didn't get to partake in the FedEx Cup bonus, except for what they pay the guys who finish outside the top 125. I believe he made $800,000. Okay, Ricky Fowler's value to the PGA Tour is probably worth a lot more than $800,000. But that's all he got. Because now, obviously, he has endorsements, but that's not what we're talking about. The top guys in other sports are paid a minimum no matter what. And that's what these other rival leagues are offering. The Saudi thing, the PGL, these guys would have no-cut events. They'd probably get upfront money just to join. They'd be guaranteed a certain amount no matter how well they played. And obviously, if they perform, they're going to get paid a real lot. I kind of get where they're coming from. And you have to forget about the fact, oh, God, they make so much money anyway. That's not the point. The point is, if they have a bad year, they don't make it. If Steph Curry has a bad year, if he's injured, he gets paid. So, I get both sides of this. I think it's fascinating.
That was probably the best argument for and against both sides I've heard since this whole thing came out. Well said. That was fantastic.
Bob, you mentioned it a little bit in those comments. Tiger's press conference last week. Obviously, it was a must-see TV event. Talk about, as we shifted back here to Tiger and Phil a little bit, and then close this interview out. Talk about the current state of both of them. Obviously, Phil is in a different place than Tiger. Tiger's coming on the comeback trail. We don't know what his game is going to look like necessarily. I guess we'll find out a little bit next week, but. Just talk about the current state of both of their kind of games and where you see the next chapter of their rivalry turn friendship going.
Yeah, I think Phil's Phil is the more immediate one, and it's going to be interesting to see how he comes out in 2022. He really only had the one good week at the PGA. It's sort of lightning in a bottle. Was that the last great moment, or could there be some more? I mean, he certainly shows flashes, but his results didn't stand up. His next best finish was 17th. He was 17th at the WGC event in Memphis. He was 21st at the Masters. That's it. He missed a bunch of cuts. He was way out of contention in a bunch of tournaments. Given that, it's remarkable that he won. Not only that he won, but that he won a major, and he held off Brooks Koepka and Louis Oosthuizen, guys who are a lot younger and and obviously probably more suited to winning a major than he was. Um, the time's running out, and he had a couple of senior wins late in the year. I actually think the senior golf is going to be good for him in spots. I think he should use it sometimes as a warm up for the majors, not maybe the week before, but leading up to, because it allows him to get some confidence. Look, he doesn't have to be perfect off the tee. He can hone his iron game and his short game. Obviously, he's going to have to be more dialed in at the majors when he's getting with the regular events. But there's something to be said about having some success and building confidence and seeing the ball go in the hole. Jack Nicklaus kind of used that to his advantage when he played both in his early 50s. He contended in several majors in his early 50s after winning senior majors. So I could kind of see that working out for Phil, and it'll be interesting to see. He's usually a strong player in the early part of the year. He plays well, like at Pebble, although I believe Phil is going to play that Saudi event that's opposite Pebble this year. He's played well at some of the winter events. Is he able to sustain that into the Masters? Tiger, I think, is a much more long-range thing. Yes, he's playing in the PNC with Charlie. He'll be riding a cart. It's 36 holes. He doesn't have to hit all the shots. If you watch some of those swings that he made in the Bahamas, given the context of where he's been, it's remarkable. I mean, it really is that he's doing that. But in the big picture of playing professional golf, I don't quite think the swing speed is there. If you watched his right foot, which is where, the injuries occurred the most, that thing was planted on the ground. He's not coming up out of it. Like, in other words, he's not really pushing off, which I would think that at some point he's going to want or need to do. And, I think he kind of let on. He's probably in no position to walk 18 holes. Just walk 18 holes. Forget about playing golf and walking 18 holes. I think it's going to be he needs some time to rehab that leg, to build up his endurance. Obviously, he looked great. I mean, he looks like he's been working out, but he's
his upper body's
it's not so much
massive.
about that. It's being able to stand there for 4 hours, 5 hours on your legs, hit the shots, move around, and then do it again the next day. So I sort of have to think that we're a good 6 months away from that.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, like you said, the fact that he's Rich. So the fact that he's even swinging a golf club is amazing. When a lot of people thought he might have died in that car accident back in February, that certainly crossed a lot of people's minds, I would think. So Rich has one more question. I have two more little fun questions to get you out of here on, and then we'll wrap this baby up so everyone can move on with their lives. Rich, why don't you go, and then I'll close it up.
All right, so Bob, you kind of stole a little bit of my next question. So my question was going to be, what effect is Tiger going to have on the rest of the PGA field by playing in the PNC, sort of like mental wise? And I'm a big signals guy. I like to watch sports and look for signals and stuff like that. Do you think he's by him playing in the PNC and pretty much sabotaging his own tournament by going to the range and stuff like that this past week, and coming out onto the range with Sunday Red on? Is he trying to put other players on notice that he's going to be eventually back? Do you think?
I don't know if it's so much that as it is more just, maybe sort of giving himself a boost. I think he was sort of revitalized or rejuvenated a little bit being in a tournament setting. Think about it. He hadn't done that for a year. He hadn't been around the other players who obviously he has a lot of regard for Koepka and JT and Spieth and, some of those guys who were there. And I think he enjoyed hanging out with them. He hadn't really seen them in that setting for a long time. And then here's a golf course and, oh, wow, I'm actually feeling good. I'm going to hit balls. And yeah, you're right. I mean, he clearly knew that if he was going to do that there, he could have done it when it wasn't the tournament. He could have done it after TV went off the air. So, I don't know if it was a signal to them so much as maybe it was a signal to us. Like, hey, don't forget about me. I'm trying. I'm trying to come back.
He totally sabotaged his own tournament, though. That was funny.
I loved it, but I loved it. No, it was such like an alpha move. He's like, yeah, don't forget about me. I'm still here.
Yeah, that was pretty hilarious. So, all right, 2 questions, and then we'll get you out of here so people can move on with their lives. We talk about rivalries in sports. Obviously, there's been a number of great ones, not only in golf, but in sports across the board. You have, obviously, Jack and Arnie. You have Magic and Bird. Hockey, I guess Crosby and Ovechkin. I don't know if Gretzky had a direct rival back then, but where would you rank the Tiger-Phil rivalry? Is it on the Mount Rushmore of sports rivalries? Is it up there with Jack and Arnie? Is it Magic Bird? Is it somewhere in that area? What do you think?
I don't know that it compares to Magic and Bird. That was a pretty good one. Mm-hmm. And look, I even addressed this in there. And I got this feedback a little bit too, like, hey, Tiger didn't have a rival. They were never rivals. Yes, I think there's an argument to be made. Tiger had no rival. Tiger's rival was history. Nobody came close to his record. That's true. I mean, you can argue that if you want. I believe it's just more nuanced than that. Phil was the guy who was there the whole time. When Tiger came out, Phil was already established, won 9 times before Tiger turned pro. In fact, the day Tiger won his 3rd straight U.S. Amateur, which had the sports world on its ear, Phil was winning for the 9th time, beating Greg Norman at the World Series of Golf at Firestone. Gets into the top 10 for the first time in his career. That's where it started, kind of. 9 wins, top 10. Tiger comes along. The very next year he wins the Masters, and it went from there. And while nobody stood up to Tiger in terms of the totals, I think Phil did it the best. I mean, look, 45 wins, more than half of Tiger's total. Nobody current is even close to that. Vijay Singh won 34 times, but a lot of Vijay's wins were before Tiger turned pro. Vijay had a great run there in Tiger's era, like a 2-year stretch where he was incredible. Ernie Els obviously was a worldwide player, won all over the world. Won a lot of tournaments on the PGA Tour, won 4 majors. David Duval had a little taste of it there for a while, but it was really Phil. And of Phil's 6 majors, 4 of them, Tiger was in contention. Tiger had a chance to beat Phil in 4 of the 6 times that that he won a major, including at Muirfield, where Tiger was ahead of Phil going into the final round, and Phil stormed back. In 2010, Tiger's first tournament back after the scandal, he played phenomenally to be in position to win. But who was ahead of him? Phil. And he knew that was a huge mountain. Phil at Augusta National is no easy task to overcome when you're spotting him a 3 or 4 shot advantage going into the final round. So, and obviously, the 05 PGA, the 06 Masters, Tiger dearly wanted that one because he knew his dad was dying, and Phil took that. So, Phil might not have won as much, but he was a nemesis. And as I mentioned earlier, he became seen as a threat to Tiger. And so that's why I think it's a great rivalry. Arnie and Jack, it was a great rivalry in the sense that they were 2 huge names. But if you remember, or if you just look at the stats, Arnie never won a major after 1964. He won, he was pretty much, his legacy was established pretty much by the time, they were 10 years apart, not 5 years apart, but 10.
Fair enough.
And they became rivals also off the course. They were golf course designers and things like that. But, from like the late 60s on, certainly 1970, Arnie's getting into his 40s at that point. The 70s were Jack's decade, and Arnie was, past his prime. Arnie's last win came in 1973. So, yes, they were rivals, but I don't think they were rivals like Tiger and Phil.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, I was just curious as to where it ranks. So it's always something, in sports we always have to rank everything. So you know how that goes. Speaking of ranking, we'll get you out of here on this. You don't have to necessarily put them in order. And certainly any cool stories that you have to go along with them would be great. But top 5 Tiger Phil moments, either on the course off the course, what would you say would be the top 5 Tiger-Phil moments of the rivalry? Again, you don't have to necessarily put them in order, just 5 great moments.
I have an entire chapter in the book on the 2005 Doral. And that was Tiger and Phil were paired together in the last group. Phil began the day with a 2-shot lead. Tiger eagled the 12th hole to overtake him. He thought it was over. He actually got 2 ahead of him. Phil rallied to tie him. They went to the last hole separated by a shot. And Phil nearly chipped in on 18 to tie him. And Tiger then had to make a 4-footer to assure his win. That was an incredible duel. It wasn't a major, but it was awesome. It was really, really amazing that the way that came down. That might have been their best one, and it wasn't in a major. If there's a thing we lament is that they did not go head to head enough in the majors. They weren't paired together that often. They weren't in contention all the time. But a couple of the other ones that I mentioned, certainly the '99 U.S. Open was a key one. The 2001 Masters, where Tiger completes the Tiger Slam, and Phil had a beautiful chance to get his first major and break up the Slam. Let's see what else. Muirfield 2013, certainly. They weren't in the same group, but I mean, Phil blows past everybody shooting the final round 66. Tiger was only 2 shots out of the lead going into the final round. That was a point in time where Tiger now had not won a major for 5 years. And everybody thought, okay, it's finally going to happen. He's put himself there. Remember, 2013, Tiger got back to number 1 in the world. He won 5 times that year. He had sort of bounced back from the scandal. And there comes Phil. And another great duel, although it really wasn't a duel in the end, was 2012 Pebble Beach. And they played together in the last round. And Tiger's partner was Tony Romo in the amateur part of it.
Yep, and I remember that.
I believe they were tied going in the final round. They were a couple of shots behind the leader. And Phil shot 64 to win. And I believe it was his 40th PGA Tour title. And Tiger shot 75. He waxed him. That was in 2012. Tiger had yet to win since coming back in 2010. And, that was a time where Phil put it on Tiger pretty good.
Awesome. Awesome stuff. Bob Harrig, get his book coming out on April 26, 2022. Again, shortly after Tiger or Phil win the Masters. It's called Tiger and Phil, Golf's Most Fascinating Rivalry. Certainly anybody who's our age grew up with Tiger and Phil, and I'm excited to read the book. Obviously, we're big into golf and golf history. So, Bob, listen, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, taking a few minutes of your time, and we enjoy reading your writing, and hope maybe we'll catch you down the road. The Senior Opens in Newport in a couple of years, so you never know. We might be there. So anyway, Bob, thanks so much.
U.S. Opens at Brookline.
And the U.S. Opens at Brookline. That's not far down the road either. So you never know. We might be around. We'll pretend to be media members. Anyway, Bob, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And good luck with the book, and enjoy the holiday season.
You as well. Thanks for having me, guys. Enjoy it.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Bob.
Absolutely. This has been the Golf Dudes podcast. We're going to get out of here because we already wasted our energy. I know Rich has got a Bruins game to watch tonight, and I got things to do. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks again to Bob for coming on. It was a lot of fun, and we will talk to you guys next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. We have some Tiger golf to analyze next week, so we'll preview the PNC and whatever the hell else happens in between now and then. This is the Golf Dudes podcast. Have a great night, everybody. Have a great weekend. Peace.